Hey, it's me, TV, and today I'm bringing to you the books that made me cry throughout 2020. And if you like this video, subscribe, like, share, all that shit. And I'll have links to all my social media down below as well, so you can follow me on other platforms. Weirdly enough, there are like exactly 10 books on this list, so that's great. It was not intentional, and I only started like counting this like fairly late into the year, so maybe I missed some. But basically, these are just the books that made me like tear up or cry. Since I don't cry easily, so I kind of just added books that made me tear up too, because like I just don't cry a lot. So yeah. So like to put this into like perspective for you, I did not cry at the end of The Burning God, and like everyone else did. So like these books hit me harder than that one did. So that tells you anything. That's the only like real like barometer for this I have, since like I don't read a lot of like BookTube's faves. So like I don't know like what else might make me cry. So basically, if you read The Burning God, you can just use that as like a testing stick to see like how not emotionally available I am as a person. So yeah, let's just get started, I guess. There are a few series in this, so I won't give you like direct spoilers for like any of these series or like any of these books really. If it comes to like a book in a series, I will like, I guess, try to avoid spoiling what takes place in that book, if that makes sense. These are like kind of ranked in like which made me cry like the least, like the hardest. So like as far as I remember, so yeah. So first off is Certain Dark Things by moreno-garcia. I cried at the ending, I think, to this because like it's very like bittersweet. This has been out of print, but it's getting a reprint in September of 2021. So if you want to read this, you can, I think, place your pre-order now, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, this is a vampire noir that takes place in Mexico City. And in this world, vampires have kind of like have been discovered and they're like part of society. Except in Mexico City, it's like one of the like few places where like vampires aren't allowed to be, because they're like this place is like cracked down on them, like forbidding them from like being in the city. So our main character, Adel, is a vampire who lost her whole family when they were all like killed off. And so she's in the city trying to like escape south. So the like rival vampire gang can't like find her and kill her too. So she's trapped in Mexico City and trying to find a way out. And there she meets a boy named Domingo, who is just a human boy. And eventually, you know, stuff happens. And yeah, obviously this is a noir, so it does kind of like dark at times. And there is like lots of like death and like just like sad moments. So if you're waiting for that, yeah, I think I cried mostly at like the ending to this and the like epilogue, because like it was just like a sad time all around. It was just a time and a half. The book does take a different spin on like the usual like vampire lore, because they're like different like kinds of vampires, and they're all kind of like all over the world. For like a fairly short book, it does cover a lot of ground, and it does it, you know, pretty well, all things considered. Next, I have two books in the Night World series by L.J. Smith, and those are Dark Angel and Huntress. I think I cried the least over Huntress, so we will start there. This is book 7 in the Night World series, and technically you can read these out of order, but I don't recommend it because they kind of like build up over time. This is following Jez Redfern, who is a like half vampire, half human assassin, and she primarily kills like vampires in Night World. She's tasked with finding one of the wild powers, and through this she has to reconnect with one of her old vampire friends, Morgiad, who is a bad vampire. And of course, you know, romance ensues, drama ensues, it's a whole thing. Don't remember like which part I cried in for this. I want to say it was probably towards the end, because this book does get kind of like sad towards the end. These books are like fairly short, so there isn't like a lot to say. The whole Night World series, it was like oncoming apocalypse, because they were like written in the like late 90s. So of course it's talking about like Y2K. People in Night World, which are like vampires, witches, werewolves, they are starting to find soulmates in humans, and the soulmate connection is something that cannot be broken really, or at least cannot be broken easily. And when you do, you're like permanently shattered. So this connection is like so powerful that it is basically changing how Night World works, and we can like see Night World, you know, change throughout the books. Next is Dark Angel. This is book 4, and this one is following Gillian as she basically follows a voice one day into the woods, and she dies of hypothermia. And when she comes back, she has a voice in her head called Angel, and he helps her do stuff she would never be able to do normally. And eventually he starts asking her to do like very like dark and twisted things. Of course, Gillian does not want that. So, and that's where the plot takes off. So this one made me cry at the end because like there's a scene in it and I cried like a lot. For like the short length that this was, I cried for at least like a little bit. Actual tears fell, I'm pretty sure. Next is another book by L.J. Smith, and that is the Vampire Diaries Volume 2, and this has the Fury and the Dark Reunion. I'm pretty sure I cried at the end of Dark Reunion, which is weird because the ending is very like not the best, all things considered, but I still cried at the end because it was like so satisfying to like see like the plot points in, like see everyone happy, I guess. You know, spoilers, but it is in like a fairly happy note, and I cried because of that. So yeah, this series is basically following Elena Gilbert as she is basically wrapped into the world between the brothers Stefan and Damon Salvatore, who are vampires, and the drama that ensues from there. Is this like a great series? No. This is like written in like the early 90s, so definitely has signs of being from that time, but I still love it and I give it 5 stars, so you know, no tastier. And I might have cried towards the end of The Fury, but I don't remember. I'm pretty sure I only cried at the end of Dark Reunion. Next is Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. As usual, you're not seeing the cover. The cover has like naked women on it. I don't want to get suspended, so here we are. This is a like historical fiction novel that takes place in the late 19th century, and it is sapphic as fuck because it follows our main character Nan as she becomes enraptured by this music hall singer named Kitty. And through that, she kind of like figures out that she is attracted to women, and you know, stuff happens. It goes to like London, I think, with Kitty, and you know, drama happens. This book does get very dark in the middle, like 50%. The drama character kind of like loses everything and has to like sell herself as a sex worker. She's trapped in an abusive relationship, so trigger warning for that. There are also some like sex scenes in this, so if you don't want to read those, fair warning, I guess. Mostly I cried towards the end because, like, not gonna lie, the first like 25% of this are really slow and like are honestly like the worst part of this book. Like the first part is so fucking slow, it's actually like not good at all. Like the ending chunks are like so good, and I was like so like sucked into this world that like I cried like a lot at the end. Actual tears probably fell because like the ending just like works. It's so like nice and like warm on the inside, and yeah, it was just like a whole time. Don't hear a lot of people talk about Sarah Waters, even though like she's like one of like the bigger names when it comes to like writing like sapphic fiction, like sapphic adult fiction, so that's weird. But anyway, yeah, if you want like sapphic fiction that takes place in like the like late 19th century, that has like smut in it, has like deep characters, here you go. Next is The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. I did not cry at the ending to this. I cried like a scene, I think towards the middle, that involves Dara. Like it's like a short scene, but it fucked me up real good, and I cried like multiple times in like one sitting just to like cry more. So yeah, this series follows Nari, who's basically like a like thief slash beggar in Cairo in the like 18th century, I think, and she basically like tricks people by pretending to do magic. And in one of her little scams, she summons Dara, who tells her that she's basically like a part of like a magical race of people, and she has to be taken to the city of Daevabad to be safe. And it's also like a second POV with Ali, who is the prince of Daevabad, and he's trying to like work through the political system of Daevabad to help uplift the Shafit, who are basically a mix between like the Devas and the like humans, I think. This is also like a satisfying conclusion for like the series as a whole, because this is like the last book in a trilogy. Some choices were made, and I think actually, never mind, I think I cried towards the end too, because there is a scene towards the end that made me tear for a little bit, I'm pretty sure. If you know it, it's like one of the like last scenes with Dara in it. Yeah, that shit made me cry too. Just as a whole, this whole book was very like gut-wrenching. So you're seeing like the conclusion between like a lot of like political manipulation going on throughout like 3 books, and all kind of like comes to a head in this one, and shit goes wild. I was just very sad in this book for like a multitude of reasons, you know, including those like scenes mentioned, as well as like just like people are dying, and yeah, it's just like a lot. So yeah, that's The Empire of Gold for you. Next is Frostbite by Rochelle Mead, and I cried like a little bitch for most of the ending because there's a scene towards the end. If you've read this, then you know what scene that is, and I cried a lot. I cried thinking about it later too, so that's great. So this series is basically following our main characters Rose and Lissa as they are part of this world of vampires. I forget what like the specific terms are, but Rose is a like half-blooded vampire and Lissa is a like full-blood like royal vampire. And so because of that, Rose is basically like Lissa's bodyguard, and at the school, Rose is being trained to be like a better bodyguard. Lissa is being trained to be master of the magic powers that vampires can use. Of course, there is like ongoing drama because, you know, there are these Shirgoi, they're basically just bad vampires that are killing vampires and draining them of their blood. There is the constant threat of Shirgoi throughout the whole series. And yeah, this one gets like really sad towards the end because like an event that happens, and I cried a lot. Just like, I think it's like in the Empire of Gold where I read the scene over and over again. I read this scene over and over and over again because like it's just so fucking sad. And you don't expect it to happen, but then the event happens and you cry a lot. And yeah, it was great. Next is Indian Horse by Richard Wagamese. This is following our main character, Saul Indian Horse, as he's sent to a boarding school where it's just like horrific. And while there, he's basically given the chance to play hockey, and through that, he is given some form of an escape. And yeah, it is a reveal towards the end that I guess I should have seen coming, all things considered, but I did not see it coming. And I cried a lot at that reveal, like sad about how that event comes to pass, I guess. This book does deal with like the boarding school / residential school system that affected Indigenous people throughout the Americas. So just trigger warnings for basically everything bad that ever happened in one, because this book has like suicide, there's like starvation, there is like students being like molested. There's just like a lot of like really like horrific things that happened throughout this. They're all like realistic to what happened at these schools. This book does end on a like happier ending note, but it's still like darker in what like the theme is, I guess. So yeah, it's like a great read, and I cried a lot. So great. Paired with Indian Horse is Medicine Walk, also by Richard Wagamese. I don't remember how much I cried for this one because it was a via audiobook, but I remember that I cried towards the end a lot. So basically it's following our character who's basically, you know, sent to be with his dad because his dad is dying, and his dad wants his son to basically bury him off in the woods because they're both Ojibwe, and his father wants to be buried where the people usually buried, you know, the people like them. So obviously this feels like the death of a parent. So you might think that, you know, you'd go into this expecting like sad times, but apparently I wasn't, because I cried like a little bitch whenever his father does die, which not a spoiler because like it's in the synopsis that his father is dying, so you know what's gonna happen. But so like hits fucking hard. Even though like, his father is a shitty person, like his father is like the worst person imaginable, and somehow you still cry when he dies. So, you know, like his father was a fucking awful human being, like the worst person imaginable, and yet somehow I still cried when he died. I think this one hit like really hard because, you know, deals like the bond between like a son and his father, and you know, that really hit hard with me. So yeah, I did listen to this via audiobook, so maybe that like affected how hard I was hit. Finally is a book that made me cry 5 times while reading it, and that is The Foretelling of Georgie Spider by Emblyn Quaimona. This is the like final book in a trilogy called the Tribe series. It's very complicated to explain. Basically it is a like, it's like part post-apocalyptic but also like a utopia sort of, since that humanity has basically been, you know, almost wiped out, but they are recovering thanks to this guy named Alexander Hoffman, who discovered this concept of the balance. I know that if humans, like the bad event happened because humans weren't taking care of Earth and like animals, so the Earth, you know, bit back basically and fucked up humans. And if humans take care of Mother Earth and like recycle and take care of the water, all that shit, that the bad event will never happen again. And so in this world, we're basically following the tribe, who basically like this group of kids who have magical powers. Well, not really magical, but they're powers, you know, and they manifest in a variety of ways. And they are basically being, you know, being hunted down by the government because the government and power views them as being like abnormal and not part of the balance, and therefore they need to be wiped out in case, you know, the bad event happens again because of these kids with powers. And so we're following our main character of sorts, Shayla Wolf, as you know, she's trying to help her people, her tribe, cope with this and kind of like make the world and not view them as being like criminals and being monsters anymore. I think it was in the final like author's note for this book, the author talks about how like the codes that were affecting the like people with powers in this book, I think that are called illegals, like the code that was affecting them is basically just to basically adapted the code that was used against Aboriginal Australian people in like the like early 20th century, like late 19th century too probably. And that code basically said that, you know, you could go through the government, and if the government thought that you were like civilized, they would give you, I think, a tag. They basically like gave you some rights that were not given to all Aboriginal people, and you're basically seen as like a civilized person, you know. Of course that's really fucked up, but also if you had that tag and you were seen like talking to Aboriginal people that were not seen as civilized, you could like lose your privileges, basically go back to square one. Also, like before that, I still cried 5 times. So like, it's not like their deaths themselves that hit hard, it was like the after effects that hit really fucking hard. because like I guess the author just knows how to write. Like people coming to grips with someone dying, like that shit hit so fucking hard. It was like so fucking intense. Like I don't know how to describe this shit to you. And yeah, I think this book made me cry the most throughout the year because like it made me cry five times while reading it, and I think I cried once more while just like thinking about it, you know, afterwards. So yeah, sad times all around. And yeah, these are the like 10 books that made me cry throughout 2020. Hopefully you found something here to make you cry. Maybe you cried these already, who knows. But I will include links to all of these books down below. And if you like this video, subscribe, like, share, all that shit. And I'll have links to all my social media down below as well, so you can follow me on other platforms. So yeah, that's all from me this week. And hopefully I will see you next week.